Hey guys,
Hi,
Hey,
Jenny.
we're not live yet.
We're just going live.
Yes.
All right. Yes, we are now live, and welcome to the Rancho Santa Fe Road Task Force virtual community meeting. It's December 10th, 2020. And this is our second actual community meeting of the Rancho Santa Fe Task Force. Our first one was several months back. And
Joe, the participant list is climbing by the second, so you might want to start over in about a minute.
All right, sorry about that. So let me just give it a chance to kind of for everybody to start. I'm kind of new on this, but I'm not. But so I've been told that we have about over 100 people that registered for this event today. So Dan Vaughn is right. I'm seeing the participant list, and we have not as many as 100. So it sounds like we may actually have more people. So let's hold on for a second. We'll take a brief moment to see if we have more people that come on.
It looks like the waiting room is emptied out, and we've just got a couple of stragglers joining at this point. So I think you're probably ready to go at any point.
All right, well then I will start over. So welcome. It's a little after 6:30. This is the second meeting of the Rancho Santa Fe Road Task Force. It's a virtual community meeting because of COVID, and it's December 10th, 2020. This is our second community meeting of this task force. We had a first meeting several months ago, and at that time we created a steering committee that was empowered to kind of do some of the legwork and put some stuff together. Working with the city, we've been able to put together some studies to look at Rancho Santa Fe Road, and we've also worked really hard on some recommendations that we want to share with you tonight. So we want to share some information with you, data that we've collected with the help of the city, and also recommendations that we've put together. Also want to take a moment just to introduce some folks that you're going to hear from tonight, and also other folks that have given of their time to be a part of the steering committee. Dan Vaughn is with us tonight. Dan Vaughn is the president of the Levenheim Town Council. He's also a member of our steering committee. Twink Booman is with us tonight. And Twink was the former president of the Levenheim Town Council and also on our steering committee. Doug Goad is with us tonight, a longtime Levenheim resident and also member of our Parks and Recreation Commission for the city of Encinitas, and he is on the steering committee. Peter Cole, who is just stepped down as the former chair of the Traffic and Public Safety Commission for the city of Encinitas, is a member of our steering committee. Jennifer Bishop, who's a member of the Levenheim Town Council, and also just involved with many different functions in the community of Levenheim. She also our task force, our steering committee. Jill Treadwell is a member. Jenny Flanagan, Amy McCord, Lou Albatrice, Dave Perryman, and Waylon Myers. We've all been together on this task, and we have a lot of information to share with you today. On your screen is this is what we're going to follow. So I'm doing the welcome and introductions, and then the task force history is going to be handed off to Dan, and then we have community character, which we really thought about and had a kind of a subgroup of the steering committee working on, led by Twink Booman, and then the Encinitas traffic study, which our traffic consultants with the city of Encinitas have helped us with, and they're here to talk a little bit about it, and then recommendations and rationale. And so we did put together some recommendations from the steering committee that we want to share with you. And then there's going to be an opportunity for questions and answers. And this will be your chance to ask any questions that you have. And hopefully we can answer your questions. If not, we can always get back to you as quickly as possible with an answer. And then we'll wrap it up with what we are planning for the future into 2021 on ultimately trying to come up with a recommendation that we can submit to the city on a project that would improve the quality of Rancho Santa Fe Road from the perspective of traffic congestion and also safety features. All right, so let's move on with our agenda. I'm going to hand it off to Dan Vaughn, and he's going to talk about the task force history.
Great, thank you, Joe. So the origin of the task force dates back to the fall of 2018. Joe came to the town council at that time, having heard complaint after complaint about the congestion on Rancho Santa Fe Road, and wondering if there was something that could be done, if people wanted a change. And the town council wanted to wait until after the election season, but once that was behind us, Twink, the then president, myself and Joe sat down and mapped out a path going forward. We recruited several of the initial members to that steering committee and established a goal with the steering committee, which was to build consensus among our community and then to successfully advocate for what that consensus was. We didn't necessarily have a specific improvement in mind at that time. As individuals, I'm sure we all had ideas, but the goal was really to drive a community discussion, consensus process. And then once we got to a point where we believed we had community consensus, we transitioned to advocacy. So I hope that we're sort of building towards the end stage of the building consensus. The next step we did was to survey the community. We got 284 responses to a survey that was distributed electronically to basically each of our individual distribution groups, including the town councils. And then people were invited to share that with friends and neighbors. And then after the survey responses were in, the next step was the task force kickoff meeting, which was at the town hall in March of 2019. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the results of that survey. This is a snapshot in time back in the spring of 2019. And the responses were, roughly proportional between town council members and non-members in the Olivenheim community in the Valley. On average, people have lived here for 20 years. And about half of the people commuted during rush hour. About a quarter avoided peak congestion altogether, and the remainder were somewhere in between, where they were hoped to be able to avoid peak congestion, but couldn't all the time. And then we asked people also why they moved to Olivenheim, and the rural character was cited by almost everybody. People were allowed to name more than one, so these add up to well over 100. But trails and schools were also very common, and horses and large lots also got significant notice. The main part of the survey was to really figure out what people felt as a baseline were the issues that they mattered to most. And safety was one that was cited fairly frequently. For these curves, we're going to have some color coding on them. And here the leftmost under the safety column is those things that were critical to improve. The next category were things that needed to be improved. And the third category was nice to improve. The remainder either didn't answer the question or didn't think it was an important factor to improve. So we see that especially for pedestrians and bicyclists, there was a fairly good desire to improve the safety. And then at the heart of the issue was the dual desires to preserve our community character, which was very strongly desired, critical for the majority, and also should be maintained to the extent possible was next. And improving congestion was also very strongly desired. And those two might seem contradictory, but when we look at the individual respondents, the majority, 58%, wanted to do both, keep the critical rural character and improve the peak traffic hour congestion. There was a significant minority that were less concerned about congestion and didn't want to sacrifice community character in order to address that. And so that brought us to the kickoff meeting itself, which was held in early March 2020 at the meeting hall. We had about 35 community members. We also had some city staff representing both the traffic commission, Abe was there, and the trails. I presented the results of the survey at that time, and staff made presentations on the traffic and trails history here in Olivenheim as a ground setting thing. And then we went around the hall and gave everybody an opportunity to state their perspective on what they thought needed to be addressed. And after we did that, we went through an exercise where we tried to figure out what we had consensus on. So we asked the participants if they would agree that maintaining rural character was important. And that was a consensus opinion. Everybody was behind that, although there was some uncertainty about what exactly rural character meant. So that was a task that still needed to be determined. Maintaining the side street access, that is the stop signs that allow people to get out onto Rancho Santa Fe Road when it's fully congested or when there's high speed traffic going by, was something that was very important to a significant number of the folks there. And by and large, there was a consensus that sort of, if you guys let us have our side street, we'll let you have your side street. The safety for pedestrians crossing, so some better crosswalks and access to, especially around the meeting hall and the schools, was also very important and a point of consensus. And then we also identified that improving the traffic was important, but it was important in a specific way. We needed to reduce the bad congestion that we got during rush hour. And that could be an improvement either in shortening the duration of that rush hour and or improving the time to transit during rush hour. But equally a point of consensus was that improving traffic flow during off-peak hours was not a priority. We didn't need people driving faster through Olivenheim. We wanted people to be able to get closer to the off-peak hour transit patterns during rush hour. Improving walkability and bikeability was identified as somewhat secondary, although broadly supported. So everybody was behind it, but it was less of an urgent pain point than the traffic congestion. Through traffic, so commuters coming from Eastern Carlsbad and San Marcos and San Elijo, getting down to the I-5 South was seen as a major source of the traffic, and one that was going to be hard to address because folks will kind of adapt to the path of least resistance in transiting through the area. So there's plenty of extra capacity to top off the congestion in Olivenheim if all we do is make it more efficient. And then there was a strong commitment to community engagement and consensus building. We wanted this issue to be not something that divided the community, but something where we could listen to each other as neighbors and come to common cause. And with that, I'm going to hand the speaker slides over to Twink, who will talk about the first of those TBDs, community character. The second of those TBDs was the gathering data to understand the magnitude of the traffic issue and how fast we could resolve and how we could best approach that. And that'll be the subsequent discussion by Abe and Dave. So Twink, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, there were several of us on the Community Character Committee, and we met a few times to come up with what would best describe Olivenheim's community character. And that had its beginnings actually in 1885, when the Olivenheim colonists set aside the property for the meeting hall that was built in 1895, when the Olivenheim, or the 10th anniversary of the Olivenheim colony. The meeting hall and grounds now belong to the Olivenheim Town Council. And that's what we consider the heart of Olivenheim. Our community is friendly, welcoming, and now all you have to do is attend one of our events to experience that. And those events will be happening again one day. This semi-rural atmosphere with dark skies and quiet nights make this an enjoyable place to live. The open space and hiking and horseback riding trails, along with large lots that have room for gardens, vineyards, orchards, 4-H animals, all add to the desirable community character that we all enjoy. These aspects of community character reflect Olivenheim's unique history and heritage, and should be preserved. Now, there are elements that, if introduced into a Liebenheim, would change the desirable community character. Traffic and streetlights would add light pollution to our night skies. Paved sidewalks, multi-story buildings, and small lots with large homes would forever change our community character. And that kind of ends what we came up with as the pros and cons of what is community character and what would detract from community character.
Great. And with that, we'll hand it over to Abe to introduce the traffic study.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it. Yes, as Councilmember Mosca mentioned, and Dan also clarified the story. We were approached by Councilmember Mosca after those two initial meetings, and the concern that was passed to us by Councilmember Mosca was basically the abstract, all the results and goals of those original meetings. That hey, the community feels like we got to do something about the congestion without any kind of a serious compromise of the neighborhood character and also the safety aspects that we want to have in our neighborhood. So he convinced council to allow us to hire a consultant and fund it. We got $50,000 from the city council by Councilmember Mosca's recommendation to allow us to study the travel time along Rancho Santa Fe. That was the main goal of this study. And the result was to try to relieve congestion by keeping the community character, trying to improve the safety features, and do our best to make things slower, provide more bike and pedestrian facilities along the road as much as we can. But the starting point of the study was evaluating the travel time along the corridor and then trying to build on the model that we prepared based on the data that was collected by the consultant. We were lucky enough to be able to hire STC Engineering. The company has been with the city for, I believe, more than 7-8 years now, has helped the city in numerous different projects. They are one of our trustees when it comes to traffic modeling and analysis and evaluations, both safety and mobility. With that, I'll pass it to Dave. He'll introduce himself. He has been the project manager for this study during the past couple of months, and they have a lot of good, interesting information that they've collected the data for, and then they modeled it and they evaluated different scenarios, and they have a lot of good information and then some nice, interesting suggestions and recommendations for us tonight. Dave, you can take over from here.
Okay, thanks, Abe. Can you hear me and can you see the PowerPoint presentation? We're all good.
What you're projecting, Dave, is a folder that has the PowerPoint presentation inside of it.
It's not showing the actual PowerPoint presentation.
No, it's not. You might want to stop sharing and try to share again and select the actual PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
Perfect.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
I don't dare to put the actual PowerPoint presentation on, so I'll just go through with the slides like this. Okay, so I'm David DePiro, Senior Principal Manager with STC Traffic Consultant. I've been working on this project for over the past year, working closely with Abe, your city traffic engineer, and other city staff, the Rancho Santa Fe Road Steering Committee, and your council member to develop recommendations for Rancho Santa Fe Road between Avenida La Posta and Encinitas Boulevard. Just checking, you got the next slide, right?
No, you're still on the cover slide.
Oh, boy. How about now?
No, still the cover slide.
Let's see if I can go to,
Dan, I believe I sent you the file. It might be easier for you to take over and just pass the slides for Dave. Is that something you can do?
Yeah, I thought that might be the call. I'm just trying to pull it up now. Give me a minute and we'll see whether Dave gets it first or I get it first.
yeah, it's hit or miss with these sometimes, unfortunately.
Did want to let our the folks that are participating and listening at home, if they do have questions, they're free to ask those questions in the Q&A box. And so we'll either, at the Q&A time, we'll either call on you to raise your hand and ask your question, or if you ask the question in the Q&A box, we can answer that without you actually speaking and asking the question yourself. So you're free at any point in time to put that question in the question and answer box.
Okay, Dave, I have your slide 2 up now, and I can advance these for you if you want.
Okay, very good, thank you. So my guess is you're attending this meeting because you all have experienced long travel time delays. And whether you're trying to get to work, dropping kids off at school, or just running to the local grocery store along Rancho Santa Fe Road. This is not only because of the amount of traffic using Rancho Santa Fe Road, but also because of the number of always stops that are on it. And that's 7 always stops within a 1 mile length of the corridor. 5 of those always stops actually have low side street volume. And what we noticed when we analyzed this stretch of Rancho Santa Fe Road was, as I'm sure you're all aware of, Lone Jack and El Camino del Norte were the 2 choke point intersections. Next slide, please. So what the team's focus has been while working on this project is how can we reduce travel time and delay, and at the same time, keep speeds in check, continue to provide safe roads for all types of road users, whether you're driving in a vehicle, riding a bike, or walking as a pedestrian. Next slide, please. Again, the facts are that the heavy congestion and queuing of the traffic you'll see is southbound in the morning peak hour, and just the opposite you experience in the northbound direction during the evening peak hour. Next slide. So these photos were taken in February of this year before we had lockdown. And I believe you can see from pretty much every always stop that we took these photos. The first 3 is at Olive Crest, the next one's Lone Jack, and the third one's El Camino del Norte. Again, this is your evening peak hour. We see quite a bit of congestion and long delays. Next slide, please. And moving further to the south, from 9th Street to Whispered Winds, and then 7th Street. When you get to 7th Street, you can kind of actually see traffic's moving pretty good going in the northbound direction in the evening. But as you continue further north, that's when you see more congestion at the always stops. Next slide, please. What this slide shows is we went out and did turn and movement counts in the morning peak hour and the afternoon peak hour. And I won't spend too much time on this, but what you'll see for the 7 always stop locations is that it's kind of got low side street volumes during both peak hours, except for the 2 intersections, which are the choke points that we found as we were studying this segment. And that's at Lone Jack and at El Camino del Norte. Next slide, please. This slide shows basically what the ADT is on Rancho Santa Fe Road. And we see that it's south of El Camino del Norte. It's around 12,500. And as you move north of El Camino del Norte, it gets to 15,000 plus ADT. So El Camino del Norte seems to be like the location where you see a rise in ADT along this segment. Next slide, please. So as we went through and studied the alternatives, what we came up with was on the left side, you see what the existing road intersection controls are. And that's basically a signal at your bookends at Avenida La Posta and down at Encinitas Boulevard, and then your 7 all-way stop signs in between. And the alternative that's being recommended is to install roundabouts at Lone Jack and at Camino del Norte and keep the all-way stops at the other 5 intersections. In this slide, it shows what the roundabout concepts can look like. So on the left side, you have Rancho Santa Fe Road at Lone Jack, and this is with a 100-foot diameter circle. And the way this is designed is that you would have your inscribed circle to be about 40 feet, your truck apron to be 10 feet, and then the travel lanes to be about 20 feet going around. And that's the case for the roundabout on the right side of page 2, and that's at El Camino del Norte. Again, this is it looks like it can be fit within the existing right of way, but it would have to move on to engineering design to see for sure. Advantages of roundabouts is that they are traffic calming measures. They drastically reduce traffic accidents. With any 4-way intersection, you usually have 32 conflict points. With roundabouts, you actually have 8. They're safe for pedestrians to cross. You're only crossing half the road at a time. And it also allows for traffic to go back the way they came if they want to make a U-turn. It doesn't require power like a traffic signal would. With the fires we've been having and the rolling blackouts, it wouldn't affect a traffic control device like this. And it keeps within the rural characteristics of the community. Next slide, please. So again, you ask, with a 100-foot diameter roundabout, would it work? Well, you guys have already proved that it's worked in 2 locations on Locadia Boulevard. This one at Hermes Avenue I went on Google Maps and I measured it out from the curb to curb diameter to be about 90 feet. And on the right side, you can see how traffic moves around the roundabout quite easily. Again, the important roundabouts is to provide deflection for traffic calming. Next slide, please. And then the other location just to the east, I measured this roundabout to be at 95 feet with a diameter. What I like to show in this slide is if you have time, when I went on Street View, this is a box truck going around the roundabout. And what I notice is this box truck is actually making a U-turn and going back the other way towards I-5. So I found that interesting, and it easily seemed to be able to maneuver around this roundabout. Next slide, please. So with heavy traffic in the morning, it takes a little over 16 minutes to go from Avenida La Posta down to Encinitas Boulevard. And you can see that the backup really starts at Lone Jack. The numbers we're showing in the southbound direction under the existing shows that we have a backup of almost 12 minutes going from Avenida La Posta down to Lone Jack. And if you look to the right side of this figure, it actually shows by installing roundabouts how we improve the travel time. It goes basically in the morning from 16 minutes down to about 9 minutes. And again, you can see how we improve the travel time going south from Avenida La Posta down to Lone Jack. It's improved by about half. Next slide, please. And again, just the opposite. This is the PM peak hour travel. On the left side of the screen shows what the existing conditions are, and we show that it's almost 19 minutes to go from Encinitas Boulevard up to Avenida La Posta. And by installing the 2 roundabouts that are being recommended, you can see that we've improved travel time from about 19 minutes down to 15. What you see in this figure too is where you start seeing the backup, it happens around Lone Jack and it backs up into Camino del Norte and further to the south. And by flushing the traffic out with the roundabouts, we obviously can improve traffic moving along Rancho Santa Fe. In fact, we've done such a good job moving traffic along Rancho Santa Fe by installing the roundabouts that it's now backs up at Avenida La Posta. And we're showing almost a 10-minute backup at that intersection. So I just want you to remember that because we're going to come back to that in another slide. Next slide, please. So the intersection conditions, the 2 roundabout locations at Rancho Santa Fe Road and Lone Jack. Under the existing always stop traffic controls, it's actually unacceptable for both AM and PM at Rancho Santa Fe and Lone Jack. But by installing the roundabout, we bring it up to be acceptable. And for Rancho Santa Fe at El Camino del Norte, it's actually acceptable level of service today under the always stop, but by installing the roundabout, we improve it greatly. And when I talk about unacceptable level of service, that's level of service at E or F, and acceptable level of service is D or better. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, with the roundabout and the PM peak, we have almost a 10-minute delay as you're coming up towards Avenida La Posta. And one of the reasons for that is the way it's designed currently, you have 1 northbound left turn and a through right turn lane. And it's actually operating at a level of service E today. But we took a look at it, and with restriping measures, staying within the existing curb to curb, we feel that you could restripe it to provide a left turn lane northbound, a through, and a through right. And by doing that, we can improve the level of service from level of service E to level of service D, which will also improve the delay in travel times going northbound. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we're trying to improve safety for pedestrian and bicycles too. And by doing so, if we look at taking the travel lanes from 13 feet down to 10 feet along Rancho Santa Fe Road, and again, we're still looking at exactly where we might want to do this, but by reducing the travel lanes, you can actually widen the shoulders in some areas up to 6 feet. Next slide, please. And knowing that Trail 82 is coming in on the east side of Rancho Santa Fe Road from El Camino del Norte down to Encinitas Boulevard, you can actually shift the road over to the east and reduce the travel lanes down to 10 feet. So if you have your Trail 82 at 8 feet wide on the east side of the street, we're looking at, you could possibly widen the shoulder on the west side for pedestrian and bikes from 7 to 10 feet. Next slide, please. So we also looked at installing the potential of installing a mid-block crossing. And this is about halfway between Morning Sun and Olive Crest. And a mid-block crossing with that's uncontrolled, you can install rectangular rapid flashing beacons or possibly in-pavement flashes. That section of road, it's actually wide enough where with some design work, you might be able to put in a refuge island too, and something to look at. So next slide. This is my final slide, and to just wrap up, summary of our recommendations is to install roundabouts at Rancho Santa Fe Road and Lone Jack, and also at Rancho Santa Fe Road and El Camino del Norte. Look at restriping the northbound direction at Rancho Santa Fe and Avenida La Posta to go from a left and a through right lane to a left, a through, and a through right lane. So add an additional travel lane, which will definitely improve travel times and delay along that stretch. Restripe the roadway to reduce lane widths to 10 feet where we can and increase the shoulder widths. And add a mid-block crossing south of Morning Sun Drive. And with that, concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you, Dave. All right, and with that, we'll hand the presentation over to Amy for the steering committee's recommendations and rationale.
Hi, I'm Amy, and I guess the steering committee was working in parallel with David, and we have some of the same information to share. But our intent was to take what we learned from the detailed analysis provided by the traffic experts and factor in the community's stated goals of improving safety while preserving rural community character. We looked at every intersection, and in each case, our objective was to find ways to calm traffic, reduce overall congestion, and improve safety. The steering committee reached consensus on the following recommendations. If you would please continue entering your questions in the chat box, that'd be great, and our experts will get to them after I finish with the recommendations. Next slide, please, Dan. In phase 1 of the road improvements, the goal was to reduce the heavy southbound congestion on Rancho Santa Fe Road as it approaches Encinitas Boulevard during the morning commute. After adding a second southbound left turn lane and reconfiguring the northbound lanes, the traffic flow has improved. Next slide, please. In phase 2, there will be a focus on safety issues that need correction. There's a lot of community support for improving walkability on Rancho Santa Fe Road. So the steering committee proposes adding crosswalks at the 5 intersections where there are currently 4-way stops. Those would be Olive Crest, Lone Jack, El Camino del Norte, Whisper Wind, and Ranch View Terrace. After implementing these crosswalks and hearing community reaction, it's possible there may be consideration for additional crosswalks. We know that speed is a problem, especially on the wider sections of Rancho Santa Fe Road. Our existing speed limit of 40 miles per hour is too high for many parts of the road. There have been numerous accidents where cars have veered off the road. Traffic engineering is working on a plan, which David just described, to calm and slow traffic by narrowing lanes on Rancho Santa Fe Road. After this is completed, conducting a speed study will determine what speed limit is optimum for pedestrian safety and still practical for vehicles. The safety of students walking and bicycling to school is a top priority. It may make sense to post school zone speed limit signs of 25 miles per hour near Degano and OPE. We recommend installing split rail fencing on the east side trail from Lone Jack Road to the northern boundary of Oliebenheim. This would create a visual barrier between the road and the trail and would keep children from dashing into the street. Nearly 20 years ago, stop signs were installed on Rancho Santa Fe Road. The objective was to keep the road small and rural and to slow traffic. Those goals were achieved. The alternative would have been to widen the road and install traffic lights, which would turn the corridor into a thoroughfare, something that most Oliebenheim residents have never wanted. Today, we propose to keep the stop signs because they still work to slow traffic and they allow residents to turn out of their neighborhoods. Next slide, please. In phase 3, the city will complete its plan to build Trail 82 on the east side of Rancho Santa Fe Road from Encinitas Boulevard to El Camino del Norte. This will allow residents to walk safely to the corner shops. At the top of the hill, just south of Morning Sun, a raised crosswalk is being considered. This would eliminate jaywalking and provide a safe crossing zone for Degano students. It would also calm traffic in a section of road that is prone to high speeds. Just north of Pepper Tree Lane, there's a dangerous curve where fatal accidents have occurred. Cars turning into Pepper Tree Lane sometimes block traffic, which has caused accidents, and people turning out have no visibility. In phase 3, city staff will work to find a solution that reduces this safety hazard. Next slide, please. The intersections at Lone Jack and El Camino del Norte have the heaviest load of traffic during peak hours. The traffic model shows that changing these intersections is critical in order to reduce peak hour congestion. These two intersections are also heavily used by pedestrians and should provide safe crossing for everyone on foot, bicycle, and horseback. There are really only 3 options for traffic control at these intersections. One was to do nothing, which would obviously not change the congestion. Another would have been traffic lights. And I just was going to give you some background on how we decided that we don't prefer traffic lights. When they're used at an intersection, speed on the roadway goes up because drivers try to beat the red light. Increased speed on Rancho Santa Fe Road would attract more cut-through traffic, which would soon return us to the same level of congestion we're trying to get rid of now. At traffic lights, idling cars accumulate during the red light, which increases CO2 emission levels. When the light turns green, cars accelerate simultaneously, causing much more noise. Signalized intersections would flood nearby homes with unwanted light. There's really nothing about traffic lights that's in keeping with Oliebenheim's desire to maintain its rural character. Next slide, please. After weighing all the requirements, the steering committee reached consensus that the best option at Lone Jack and El Camino del Norte is to install roundabouts in phase 3. The initial consideration of a roundabout sometimes meets with resistance if people are not aware of the benefits. Once people get used to roundabouts, surveys show that they really like them. Roundabouts calm traffic and improve traffic flow. The typical speed in a roundabout is 15 to 20 miles per hour. Because there's not a lot of stop and go, there's less noise from acceleration. Roundabouts also offer a significant benefit for pedestrians, safety benefit. The crosswalks are outside of the circle, and medians allow pedestrians to cross only one lane of traffic at a time. Roundabouts have been shown to be between 7 and 9 times safer than traffic lights for injury and fatal accidents. The Federal Highway Administration states that typically installing a roundabout instead of a traffic light results in a 76% reduction in injury accidents, a 90% reduction in fatalities, and 40% reduction in pedestrian collisions. Since we are only in the concept stage, no roundabout designs have been considered yet. When we get to that stage, we will address the exact size, location, and configuration. The design will be required to accommodate oversized vehicles like fire trucks and large gooseneck horse trailers. It will also provide safety for those crossing on foot, horseback, or bicycle. The steering committee is proposing our consensus recommendations to you as a way to encourage your input. We would like Rancho Santa Fe Road to serve the community in the best way possible, and we feel that our recommended plan is a nice blend of improving safety, preserving community character, and relieving the worst of the traffic congestion. I see there are lots of questions, so let's turn it over to the experts and the Q&A period.
Great, thank you, Amy.
So if anybody has a question, as it says there, just raise your hand. And Dan, did we want to alternate between you and I and reading some of the questions in the question box as well?
Absolutely, and maybe as we see hands raised, we can loop them in as well.
All right, let's see. I don't have any hands raised at this point, so I'll go and read some of the questions. One of the first questions: were horse trails included? I think we did. We've been talking about trails and talking about the development of Trail 82. And so certainly within the community character, we've been looking at the importance of trails, and also as a city, we have a lot of our master plans together with regard to trails and the trails that we need. There's also the Encinitas Trails Coalition that's been advocating for closing a lot of gaps in our horse trails and recreational trails. And so that's something that we're very keen on. We looked at the El Camino del Norte Trail, which is underway now, and also the Rancho Santa Fe Road Trail, which we've just talked about, which we're advocating for completion of that trail as quickly as possible. So I think I answered that question. Let's go to, we have.
Yeah, I've got a first hand raised. So maybe we'll recognize Arun. Who I've asked to unmute, I think. Arun, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. My question was, have you guys discussed this with the city of Encinitas, who are considering allowing a high-rise building in an Olivenhain area right behind Leviquio's, and the effect of that on the traffic?
So I'll take that one. Many of us are also involved in Encinitas Residents for Responsible Development and other organizations that are working on holding the proposed project to rigorous standards, but that is independent of this project. This project is really looking at the traffic on Rancho Santa Fe Road as it exists today and what we can do sort of independent of that proposed project. Certainly that proposed project would only worsen the traffic congestions on Rancho Santa Fe Road.
But shouldn't it be combined? I mean, if we are having problems now, can you imagine 500-600 cars more from the same area? And I think this should be worked hand in hand. It just doesn't make sense to have this thing done and then we find, whoops, there are so many more cars now, and now what do we do?
Okay, I'm going to ask Abe, who, as the chief traffic engineer, has visibility into that project, which is still at the planning commission stage, or the planning department stage. It's not yet in a completed application. But Abe, maybe you can speak a little bit to what we're doing now and how a potential goods in project might affect what we're doing.
Yes, sure. As the majority of Olivenhain residents who are interested in, the traffic conditions of the road are aware of the situation with the housing element of the city and the by right condition of certain sites. I believe there are like 7 or 8 sites around the city that we have certain state mandates to allow them a certain number of units. I mean, the story behind how during the past couple of years, we got to this point where we have some sites that we are, basically mandated to allow a certain number of units to be built in them. It's a different story. It's really not a topic that we can talk. We don't have the time. it needs its own conversation. I'm sure many of you have been involved and are aware. The Goodson project, the city is doing its best. One of our engineers, one of our associate engineers on our team is actively reviewing the traffic impact analysis report that is being provided by the developer's consultant, by Mr. Goodson's consultant, to the city. We drafted the scope. We had multiple back and forths. The developer wanted to do some studies, didn't want to do some aspects of the study that we were asking for. Attorneys got involved. The city is doing its best by its legal rights. The total amount of right that we have, asking the developer to provide us their impact and the mitigations needed to basically mitigate their potential impact. We're doing our best, but as said, this developer, the development project cannot be stopped. I mean, I guess that's the best way to say it. How that potential impact can change the findings of our study, it would be very minimal, because as Dave mentioned, we're looking at around 12,000 south of El Camino del Norte and 15,000 north of that. Goodson's project, if that's our main concern, its impact on the travel time along this stretch during peak hour, as big of a project as it is, considering the nature of Rancho Santa Fe, how it operates, and the fact that the project will not have, at the moment at least, will not have direct access to Rancho Santa Fe, the impact of that project on travel time along the road would be very minimal. I hope I've been able to partially answer the question.
All right, let's go to the next question that we have. So I have a question here in the Q&A box. It says, curious if traffic circles were identified as detrimental to community character. Also, they ask, they seem to work well on Leucadia Boulevard and Santa Fe, but could unfortunately mean more commuter traffic on Rancho Santa Fe Road by making the commute faster. I think that Amy really kind of highlighted why it's actually in sync with, consistent with our community character, more so than all of the other devices and mechanisms that we've looked at from traffic signalization. And so it seems to be much more in sync with our community character. That's what we thought as a steering committee. And then did you, Amy or Jenny, did you want to talk at all about why you think that, or even the traffic engineer, why this actually is going to, this device is going to make it the traffic congestion less on Rancho Santa Fe Road? Because it seemed this last part of the question seems to think that perhaps it could actually invite more and to make the situation worse.
I can try to take a first pass at that. I think that the general issue with the commuter traffic, that is the full cut through stuff, is to some extent something that we can't solve in isolation on Rancho Santa Fe Road. And so some of that will go to the circulation element that the city's working on for north-south, and some of that will have to be tackled at a regional level. Whatever we do that increases the efficiency will undoubtedly draw extra traffic to harm some of the good that we've done. But what's interesting is that in the off-peak hours, we're actually not introducing additional congestion. In the off-peak hours, we have the stop sign still in place. We have the traffic calming. It should actually be a safer and more pleasant experience in the off-peak hours. And we undoubtedly will end up giving back part of the benefit to cut through traffic in the absence of larger scale regional solutions. Dave, did you want to add anything on that?
I would just like to add, Dan, you pretty much covered everything. The only other thing I would mention is by adding the 2 roundabouts, you still keep it in place the other 5 all-way stop signs at the other intersections. So it's still not going to be as convenient for everyone to go from point A to point B, having those other intersections with the all-way stops in place. We're just, where the 2 choke points are, we're just making traffic move a little bit smoother, reducing the congestion a little around those intersections and delay, but you still have those other intersections with the always stops. So there's somewhat of a deterrent in itself from people wanting to possibly travel along the stretch of road.
Great, thanks. Should we go to our next raised hand?
Yeah, let's do that. It looks like Jenny Guntherson. So I'm going to unmute you, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Joe. I was just wondering if the city owns the land that would need to be available for the roundabouts. I know it takes a little more land around the intersections.
So we haven't actually, as David was talking about, we haven't actually gotten to specific engineering of the roundabouts. And so we're really in early stages of looking at whether or not roundabouts would work. But from an engineering perspective, we haven't designed anything. So, but I think the desktop analysis that David has done shows that that the roundabout could fit within the public right of way that we already own. And so, but I'm not sure if once they get into engineering, whether or not there would be a need for greater amounts of land. But right now, it appears that it could fit within the property that we own. I think you had another question that was actually in the boxes. You're free to ask any other questions that you have actually asked in the boxes as well.
Oh, thank you. I just had noticed that with the stop signs being repainted in the various intersections, that a couple of them have not been repainted. I was just wondering if that would go ahead and be repainted on the Rancho Santa Fe Road.
I believe they will be. I think that was just a maintenance issue. I think every so often that they're redone. Abe, do you have any additional information on some of those painted traffic signs on the roads? Some of them were scratched off and then they were repainted.
We have, as you know, we have different groups in the city doing CIP work. This one was, as far as I know, our public works department doing refreshing. Their schedule is a little different from us. Every year they go around the city. They have a map that shows like which striping needs to be refreshed in the city, and they just refresh them. So if there is something missing in there, I'm sure we can let them know, or they might come back and do it. But this was not an engineering project.
Right.
Okay, just because a couple of the stop signs area were repainted on Lone Jack and El Camino del Norte, but just not some of the other smaller streets. But I'm sure it'll happen eventually. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny. Dan, did you want to read the next question or call it on person?
Sure. We got one from Carol Knight asking, when were the photos taken? Was it pre-COVID? And the answer is yes. The photos as well as the quantitative analysis that David shared was pre-COVID. Some of the modeling work was done post-COVID, and as a result, some of the through traffic measurements were done off of Google data rather than live work because we were into COVID by then. But the model presented is representative of pre-COVID conditions.
All right. So did we want to go to Michelle? Is it Totoli? Let's go to her. Michelle, you are unmuted, I think. Or you can unmute yourself. And I think you had a couple of questions in the Q&A boxes as well, if you want to ask those.
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you, Michelle. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was just putting down some comments as you were speaking, and I think this looks like it would be a lovely solution to the Rancho Santa Fe. You addressed the horse trails. I also had a question though, when the horse trails come down in front of Pepper Tree, what will be their exit spot? You know, there's some vacant land there now, but we're gonna have horses down there, and then where do they go? So that's just a question. And I would hope that the traffic circles, the roundabouts, are designed to make the traffic move better and not to just calm and slow down the traffic. We've been through some of the ones up in San Marcos, and it's just annoying. It doesn't do anything for the traffic. They're pretty, but they don't do anything functional. Comment on the rapid flashing. Does that become another stop sign if pedestrians are crossing? Just, you know, things to, you know, keep in mind how that would work. And yeah, and again, about the two projects on either side of Rancho Santa Fe Road, what we were told by the developer was that Rancho Santa Fe Road is supposed to be an emergency exit from the project and not people coming out on a regular basis, unless the city decided that there was too much traffic going on Encinitas Boulevard, and then they would have to make Rancho Santa Fe Road available as well. That's what we were told in one of his last presentations. And then obviously the roundabouts have to be, big enough somehow to let the fire and other emergency vehicles to get quickly through them. Some of the fatalities we've had is because the fire truck, the first responders who were so close couldn't get through. There were no side lanes. And now with the roundabout, I don't know if that makes it better or worse, but maybe that could come into consideration so that the first responders that are within a half a mile can actually get down to Encinitas Boulevard if it's needed. So thank you very much. And Twink, you did a brilliant job of describing our rural community. I'm an old timer as well, and so I really appreciate your work. Thank you all.
Thank you, Michelle. So those were great points that I've just captured. And so I'll take a couple of them. And then Dan, if you want to take any of them too. In terms of Trail 82, which is the trail on the eastern portion of Rancho Santa Fe Road from El Camino del Norte going south to Encinitas, there'll be a little kind of bridge that will, at the end of the southern portion there, that will cross where there's a bunch of above ground facilities and where there's a ditch there just before you get to Pepper Tree. And then it will cross over Pepper Tree and then be on the eastern portion or western portion of the pumpkin patch there, and then we'll end at the sidewalk on Encinitas there. Good question about how that would connect folks if you're on horseback or leading your horse further south, how that would connect and where they would go. I'm not necessarily sure if you're that far south, how you would connect and what the gaps are. Maybe Jenny or even Doug Goad would know about gaps in the trail system of how you would get the horse back onto another trail because it wouldn't be one down there. Emergency vehicles too, I'll take that one as well. Certainly when we're designing, if we do in fact recommend and we're going forward with roundabouts at El Camino del Norte and Lone Jack, it would have to be designed in a way that would facilitate emergency vehicles. And we know that we have folks with horses and trailers. And so it would have to be designed in a way that would allow that to happen. And we of course have our Liebenheim fire station on the corner of 11th, Lone Jack and Rancho Santa Fe Road. So it certainly would have to pass muster with our fire department as any other roundabout would. So, but I think Dave had shown some pictures of the kind of similar type of roundabout on Jimenez that could actually work on Rancho Santa Fe Road and could actually allow for the traversing of emergency vehicles.
And I think the other question that was asked in that thread was the effect of the roundabout, not just in traffic calming, but in reducing the worst of the congestion. Abe or Dave, would either of you like to talk to the benefit of the roundabout with regards to the congestion?
I'm more than happy to. So in one of my slides, I was showing that at the intersection of Rancho Santa Fe and Lone Jack, currently the way the always stop traffic control device that's there today, it operates at an unacceptable level of service. It's actually during the peak hour, a level of service of F. And by installing the roundabout, it moves to an acceptable level of service, which is D or better. And that goes for the same for El Camino del Norte. It currently does operate at an acceptable level of service with the always stop, but it improves it to a much better level of service with the roundabout. So most of the roundabouts I've seen is people can traverse through the roundabouts and you don't have the stop delays like you would with an always stop. So I've seen roundabouts improve traffic flow, not be detrimental. The one last thing I would like to bring up too is she asked about the RRFBs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And those are not stop signs. Traffic would continue to move through on Rancho Santa Fe Road as long as there's no pedestrians crossing. When someone pushes the button and the rectangular rapid flashing beacon comes up, then people have to stop. But if no one's crossing there and the lights aren't flashing, then you can just move through.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe it's time for another written question. So it looks like Rachel Graves asks, with so many people working from home, it's likely they'll continue to do so, at least part-time, long-term. Shouldn't we wait to see if traffic even remains a problem in the coming months and years before spending money and time changing the road? And I mean, I don't know how many people have been stuck in rush hour during the last month or so, but it's back. The traffic congestion, even right now in the heart of a mandatory lockdown, is extensive in the evening. I've observed, and I'm sure that others have as well. I think that the likelihood is that the traffic will only continue to build, and the reality is that in order to get money allocated by the city for a capital improvement project like this, and the engineering work done and the work built in, we're talking about a 2-year timeline, I would guess. Joe, you probably have a better issue on that. But the longer we wait, the later we'll get started, and the later we'll have a improvement.
Well, certainly the more that we have a community consensus on the things that we want to do, I think the stronger our case is to be made to the city that we want to have something happen as soon as possible. Certainly there are some I don't mean, the first phrase that came to mind was low-lying fruit. There are certain things that I think are easier to deploy than others, so that we can probably do that sooner than later. But we, I would just underline what Dan is saying, that it's pretty reasonable to say that we'll return to a pre-COVID level of traffic sooner than, at some point in the near future. And these type of projects take a long time to plan and to execute and to fund. And so starting now is important. So if there's no more to be said on that, I can go to the next speaker. There's a person in the queue. His name is Stephen Lord, and I'm going to allow him to speak. Stephen, you are now able to unmute yourself if you'd like and ask your question.
Well, I'll start off by saying, I'm from England, so we've a lot of roundabouts in England. And I've observed over the years, traveling back and forth, that they work okay, there's sort of low to medium traffic density. But when you get higher density, they don't work very well at all. And then what you see is you end up putting a whole bunch of traffic lights. Replacing the roundabout, or you have to go through a traffic light to get onto the roundabout and off the roundabout. You particularly see this on the motorways there, where they had roundabout access. So I guess my question for Dave would be, the one that's the worst is the Ronjack one, right? So is there, well, I guess there's two questions. If we put a traffic light there instead of a roundabout, how much better would the commute time be? And the second part of that question is there a risk that if the traffic goes up by, I say, 50% over the next 5 or 6 years, which you could well do, that the roundabout would be overwhelmed and wouldn't really function very well?
Dave, you want to go ahead and answer that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so just back to the roundabouts. If there's way too much traffic, they don't work in congested areas. The one thing that we've studied in the past that we find out where roundabouts don't work well is where you have heavy left turn traffic. So if you have a if you have side streets with a lot of left turns, or on the major street where you have a lot of left turns turning onto the side streets, that's where we've seen where roundabouts don't work well. But in this particular case, the lefts are not as high as what would be detrimental to the roundabouts. And again, running the analysis, we show that they are actually acceptable. As far as the traffic signal goes, yeah, we looked at that too, but I didn't prepare any material to really talk about that right now because our focus is on the roundabouts. So I think I'll just leave that there for now.
Okay, so my comment went back would be, if I can still be heard, is that probably means the answer is yes, it would be faster if we had traffic lights. And a reduction from 18 minutes to 14 minutes is not that great a reduction on the traffic going north, which is by far the worst problem.
Yeah, so I can address that a little bit. The traffic going north, 18 minutes to 14 minutes is for the full corridor. And you'll remember that the last 9 minutes of the delay was up at the signal at La Pasta. So the changes in striping and better throughput at that traffic signal were not built into the model. So the 14 minutes would likely go down maybe to 9 minutes or 8 minutes as that traffic backup at that 9 minutes goes back down to a more normal 4 or 5 minutes time frame. My recollection is when we looked at the model with the 2 traffic signals, there is maybe as much as a 2-minute benefit in the best case scenario for the traffic signals, and a slightly worse in the best comparison for the roundabouts. We're committed to transparency on this, and so we'll make sure that we post to the website when that gets up the details so that everybody can review those data comprehensively. In general, the roundabouts and the traffic signals were broadly comparable in improving the peak rush hour.
Listening to a meeting on my phone. I've been sitting in my car.
Jennifer Bishop?
I just
thank you. Perfect.
I think I would just add that, you know, in addition to what Dan said, I mean, we'll definitely get all of the analysis that we've received, the steering committee's received. We'll put it on our website, which actually we'll have a page on the Leaving Town Council's website, I think. And so we'll have a page there, and we'll direct you to go there and see all of the information in whole. I would just add again, Amy had, I think, highlighted this pretty well, McCord, in her presentation, which is that most of us in the steering committee felt that the traffic signals were not something that was in keeping with the community character. And so though there may have been a bit more of a savings in time, that it was outweighed by the sacrifices in community character. All right, so we're gonna.
If I could, I'll just add that I took a quick look at our analysis, and it does show the roundabouts work better than the traffic signals. And when we share all that information, they'll see that information.
All right, so, so let's move on to the next question. And do we have one that we want to read?
Sure, I can read Carol Knight's question, which is what time of day and what is ADT? So she's referring to the quantitative counts. And that was the peak hour, which I believe in the morning is maybe 7:30 to 8:30. And in the evening is like 4 to 5. And so it's the maximum, whatever the maximum hour was. And then ADT is average daily trips. So that's the total number of car traveling the corridor or a section or segment over the course of the day.
All right. And then Bob has, is there existing roundabout of this size, question mark, Leucadia, question mark? Yes. And so on Leucadia Boulevard, there are a couple of roundabouts, and Dave had put up examples of those and said they were fairly similar to the ones that would probably deploy at El Camino del Norte and Lone Jack, though again, we've not really had engineering designs on this, but they are quite similar. So we feel that that there is enough public right of way and that they actually could function in the same fashion that the ones on Leucadia Boulevard do. Let's see. Will property need to be purchased? We already talked about that, right?
Joe, I'm going to go back to a speaker.
Go for it.
Pat, you're free to ask your question.
Pat Muller, this is
Yes.
his wife. This is Janice Muller, actually.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Pat's behind me. But the question is, we live on Valserena Drive, so our actually biggest, well, besides congestion, our issues are fire life safety, exiting in the case of an incident. We realize that's, an extraordinary event, and yet we know that getting out of here at rush hour forces us to drive roundabout through Rancho Santa Fe in order to make anything in a timely manner. So how was that considered in your analysis?
That's a great question. So the fire safety evacuation route wasn't a primary focus of this effort, but based on the success that I've felt from the collaboration with the city and Joe on behalf of the town council and other residents, we took that as a model. And very recently, the Olivenheim Fire Safe Council and their president, Denny Neville, myself and Joe have been beginning discussions about how we can have a similar collaborative look at the evacuation fire risk here. It's very early stages of that, probably 2 years behind where we are on this task force, but I'm hopeful and optimistic that we'll be able to have a similar collaborative, data-driven, consensus-building conversation. Joe, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thank you, Pat, and just for attending tonight and for your question. I hope you do get involved with the Fire Safe Council. In terms of the roundabout, we haven't really done the analysis in terms of emergency vehicles traversing it and anything about safety vehicles. But know that the fire department will have to sign off on anything that is deployed in the streets. And so once we're engineering this and we're getting to that level of detail, if this is something that the community wants to recommend to the city council, to the city, we would start the design and we would see whether or not, if it would slow down. Can we design something that would allow for emergency vehicles to get through there at the same pace that they can get through there now? And so those are all questions that we have to answer in the future. And certainly fire department is going to be one of the departments of our city that is at the table, making sure that whatever we put in there is not slowing them down.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the roundabout than I am about having perhaps an alternative third lane on Rancho Santa Fe Road, so that in the case of mass evacuation from Lone Jack, from Camino del Norte, we have the opportunity to get out of here. And I don't think that 2 lanes is sufficient. I realize 2 lanes is what the community character is about, but I wonder if the third trail for pedestrians might not be considered or designed as potentially a drivable lane in the case of an emergency. It's a design consideration. I really would hope that it's not eliminated by anything that's going forward right now.
So then I guess I would go back to what Dan was saying and say that right now we have an evacuation plan for Liebenhain, and folks at the Fire Safe Council and Dan through the OTC are scrutinizing the evacuation plan and are trying to work with the city to have greater input into perhaps an amended evacuation plan. And so I would encourage you, these are critically important issues, and I would encourage you to get involved in the Fire Safe Council and so that you can be a part of those discussions as they're going forward.
Yeah, I've been contacted by folks. So thank you, Joe.
All right, awesome. So let's see. Are there any questions that you've kind of eyeballed?
Yeah, I think it's up time for a written question. If we're alternating still, I got one from Bob Van Epps. Has anyone considered removing the all-way stop signs at most of the intersections on Rancho Santa Fe Road and replacing them with a sign that says something to the effect of yield to entering traffic? Stop signs would remain on the cross streets. I have seen this in other states. To me, this would dramatically improve the flow of traffic during peak traffic times while ensuring reasonable access to residents trying to enter or exit the neighborhood streets. And so we did have some of those alternative options that we looked at as part of this. The task force, when it last met physically together, the broad consensus of the folks in the room, which admittedly was about 35 residents and not everybody, but the broad consensus was that people love their stop signs, and that if you tried to take away their stop sign, they were going to be livid. So it was going to be hard to get to consensus taking out a bunch of stop signs. The other point was that when we ran the models, the benefit to taking out the stop signs in travel time was about 2 minutes or so, and it was seen at all times. So you're getting faster through travel times in off-peak hours as the primary benefit on a percentage basis of the delays. And so that was sort of the opposite of the felt pain that the community had indicated. The pain was the nightmare congestion during rush hour, and people didn't seem to have a problem with the transit time of about 5 minutes during off-peak hours. And so the benefit of taking out the stop signs didn't address the peak pain point as precisely as the roundabout solution. And it would come with sort of stiff resistance in some parts of the community that would make getting to consensus difficult, if not impossible.
All right, let's go to the hands up. We have next on our list is Gary Coop. So I'm going to unmute you. Oh, you actually have to unmute yourself. Gary.
Hi.
Gary.
Maybe you've already addressed this. You know, I put the question out before a bunch of other questions were asked, so maybe this has already been addressed. But first of all, I love roundabouts. I love the one on Lucadia, or the two on Lucadia Boulevard. I think they're great. I guess my question really had to do with the traffic study is based on sort of existing conditions. You know, what traffic is right now and what the impact of a roundabout would be, or two roundabouts. But you know, is this going to lead to an increase in the amount of commuter traffic through that Olivenhain area? And I heard comments that well, there are the other stop signs will tend to limit that. I'm certainly not a traffic expert, but that sounds like a kind of ad hoc, off the cuff comment that the limitations will really be held in place by the other stop signs. Is there? How does the traffic you know, study account for the fact that making the transition easier could actually encourage more people to come through this area?
So kind of an induced demand question. You know, make it easier, we'll invite more folks. And that's something that we've had some conversation about. Dan, did you want to comment on this, or do we want to hand this over to Dave to kind of?
I was actually going to go a slightly different way and hand it over to Abe, because this particular study was focused on the Rancho Santa Fe Road corridor exclusively. But Abe has recently started a circulation element study, which would look a little bit more at sort of the citywide patterns. And Abe, could you maybe talk to some of Gary's questions with regards to the circulation element?
Correct, yes. First of all, a minor clarification. The circulation element has not yet started. It's managed by our planning team. The engineering team, including myself, we're just supporting our planners. One of our principal planners, Jennifer Gates, is actually a project manager for that. I do believe they had
Doesn't she do everything?
It's amazing.
Well, it's considered a planning document. It's a piece of our master plan, it's general plan. But to the main point about induced demand, um, that is correct. And it's not really a Rancho Santa Fe. I mean, I do know that the problem, not the problem, the concern we have with Rancho Santa Fe is a lot of our cut through traffic is not Encinitas residents, but that really doesn't change the nature of the problem. We have it everywhere, wherever you improve a level of service on a major corridor, on a classified road above collector, a minor arterial per se. What happens is when a level of service improves from, I don't know, FE to a D or C, then you have all this induced demand using it. But again, in our case, it's I guess concern is that these are not really Encinitas residents, but that doesn't change anything. Just to give you an example, there was a state Supreme Court case, I believe, that voted um, against one of the cities in LA County that similar to this situation where they had a cut through traffic, they decided to impose a regulation that only certain vehicles for the residents of that road can use it, and it was struck down. The city's decision was struck down because a public road is considered public for everybody, not just the residents of that city. So, yeah, I'd hate to say this that there will be some losses to the advantages to the gains that we will have with those solutions that we're talked today, but it's certainly not going to be everything we'll do will be lost. No. If I wanted to guess, I would say at a maximum we'll lose 10% of our gain. It's not going to be much. You do know the neighborhood better than me. Whoever uses Rancho Santa Fe, whoever has to use Rancho Santa Fe is already doing it. They probably don't have any other route, and this is their best route already. So it's not like somebody's avoiding Rancho Santa Fe because it's in a bad shape, and if we make it better, they will show up. No, everybody is already there.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess Dan's point too was kind of more of the global picture that, you know, right now we have an awful lot of folks that are using our north-south feeders in our city just because it's the 5 freeways backed up, and perhaps it's just more difficult for folks that are coming from San Marcos or Carlsbad to get to the 5 freeway going west on Olivenheim and then Leucadia, and so they're starting to kind of drop down those north-south feeders and clog them up. And so, you know, what we do with the circulation element and how we plan out the overall circulation and how that dovetails with the county's planning for the 5 freeway and Caltrans as well is important, so that we're not seeing so many folks using the north-south feeders because they're just passing through, right? They're going further south, and if it's easier to take the 5 freeway, then they wouldn't be coming down Rancho Santa Fe Road. Dave, did you have anything else to kind of add to that discussion?
You know, I would just say, based on experiences, people do like to take the path of least resistance. But again, I'm on fall back to having the always stops. They're providing a impedance, so it's making it somewhat difficult for people to get through. I mean, if you removed all the always stops and just had the 2 roundabouts, yeah, everyone would probably be traveling along that road. You don't want to make it too good, so you draw that type of traffic in. So it's really a balancing act with the roundabouts, keeping traffic moving, having deflection at the roundabouts, so it's slowing people down and it's just not a straight shot. And you know, having the impedance by keeping the always stops where they're at today for the other intersections.
Jeff Vaccaro asks a similar question about the task force brainstormed or evaluated any methods to discourage cut through traffic. We did talk about that some. it isn't in the final scope of recommendations, which did focus exclusively on the corridor. But we've talked about how, what the folks in East Carlsbad and farther north do to us cutting through, we kind of do to Rancho Santa Fe and Solano Beach to get on at Loma Santa Fe. And that's in part because of the 5 gates and the on-ramps. And so as the 5 widening and the new on-ramp measures continue to make their way farther north, we're hoping that makes it so that the path of least resistance no longer needs to go through Rancho Santa Fe Road and La Bajada and El Camino Real and whatnot, and folks can get out to the 5 like they should, and go south from there, closer to their north-south part of the region. And similarly, we talked about on the northbound turn, the backup that ends up happening at Home Depot for folks going right onto Olivenhain Boulevard from El Camino Real can often be 2 or 3 traffic signal cycles. And Abe was looking into what would it look like if we maybe made 2 right turn lanes there to help get some of that congestion relieved. And I'm assuming that that'll be part of the city's ongoing work.
We should actually make that part of a recommendation. I think that we forgot to actually explicitly call that out. That's important as well. Abe, did you want to add anything to that in terms of northbound on El Camino Real going east on Olivenhain?
No, it's actually being slurry sealed by OMWD, and we soon will be restriping those. I do believe that we modified the striping on that intersection around 9-10 months ago. I got to go back to the plan and take a look at it. I do believe we improved it.
All right. We may also have to look at the timing of the lights as well, just to allow a higher capacity, although we can kind of work on that and see how it works. Do we want to, I noticed, Dan, that Claudia Obitroy asked a question that may be near and dear to your heart.
I did see that about 13th Street. I didn't, can you read the question if you have it in front of you? I sort of scrolled past it.
What is proposed for 13th Street? Drivers don't understand the 3-way stop or just don't want to stop when they don't see cross traffic.
Yeah, there is nothing proposed in the recommendations to change, so the stop sign would stay there. With regards to the broader question of enforcement of the stop signs and people running through the stop signs, I think Joe, maybe can you speak to the substation's ability to do enforcement back here?
Yeah, no, we have been working with our sheriff's department to step up patrols of Rancho Santa Fe Road and Lone Jack. We've had some really awful speeding on Lone Jack and some traffic accidents on Lone Jack in the last several weeks, and they have responded, and they've stepped up patrols on. Actually, I've seen a couple of times in the morning time patrols on. Folks set up on some of the side streets on Lone Jack, and they are patrolling Rancho Santa Fe Road. If anybody sees anything, and if there's a specific time of day that you think certain behavior is happening, let me know, and I can hand it off to our sheriff's department. We're also working with cooperatively with Carlsbad PD as well on the northern portions. They have a lot of issues with speeding up there as well. And so together we've been trying to, especially on the weekends when we hear these folks with their Ferraris and motorcycles kind of speeding down Rancho Santa Fe Road, we've been really trying to make an effort to be out there to discourage any kind of speeding and reckless driving on the road. Looks like we have Bob Prendergast on the line too, so I'm going to unmute him and allow him to talk and ask his question. Bob, you are now unmuted. Well, you can unmute. Yeah, Bob.
Good evening, guys. Thank you very much. Wonderful presentation tonight. Very informative, and I appreciate everybody chiming in. 2 quick questions. One, the roundabouts on Leucadia as an example that were presented by David, what is the traffic count on those as comparison to the 15,000 counts that we were seeing at peak? So what's the peak on Leucadia and Hermes streets versus the peak that we're going to propose on Rancho Santa Fe Road? Then the second question, David also presented some illustrations of the Rancho Santa Fe Road with making the lanes smaller and allowing for trails on either side. Is that a recommendation that goes to the city council at some point, or what is the process to move forward on those recommendations? And I guess not just those, but maybe others that are part of this conversation.
So I'll take the latter part of his questions, and Dave or Dan, if you want to chime in with respect to the earlier questions. So when we get to the point where we've had meetings, several, I envision that we'll have a few more community meetings where we're discussing these items, and then we formulate a recommendation that has comfortable consensus within our community of Alevinheim. Some of the recommendations will go directly to the city council, and some of the recommendations, like roundabouts and stuff that are a bit larger and more complex, will go to start off with the Traffic and Public Safety Commission of the City of Encinitas, and so that's kind of I believe the path that we'll follow. So recommendation, city council or Traffic and Public Safety Commission, then city council.
Thank you.
And Dave, do you have the ADT on Leucadia and those other traffic circles?
I do not have the ADT. I'm thinking Abe, he might know what the ADT. It's a good question. Again, we looked at the peak hour level of service.
Probably going to be different depending on the season as well.
Yeah, well, true. But the level of service shows that the roundabouts work, the ones we're proposing. So I don't have those counts. Abe might have them though.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but considering the classification and the operation of the roadway, I would say if it is less, it's probably not much less. If I wanted to guess, I would guess around 10, 12K, 10K. But I have the exact number in the office. I don't have it right now with me.
So our counts are almost 50% greater than those counts?
It's again, I just guessed.
Yeah, let's commit to getting those numbers and sharing those numbers when we have the real numbers.
Yeah.
Thank you. No worries.
All right. Well, let's move to the next question in some of the Q&A box here. I'm trying to work through ones that because we have a lot, trying to get to ones that we may have not answered.
I've got a couple, Joe. One from Carol Knight. How about putting in crosswalks at all the stop signs? And that may be possible. I think that the initial 5 of the 4-way stop signs was the higher priority for the steering committee. But as Amy said in the consensus, we can look to extend beyond those as necessary, appropriate, warranted. I know, like up at 13th Street near where I live, it's maybe 100 yards or less to walk over to Olive Crest to cross. So maybe that one isn't a high priority, but I think it's a case-by-case basis.
I see Carol in the with her hand up too. So let's unmute her, see if she has any additional questions. Carol, you're allowed. You can unmute yourself if you'd like.
In the meantime, we have a question from.
I'm here.
Okay, go for it.
I have a lot of questions. All right, yes. So thank you. So thank you for everyone who's participated tonight. I know there's a lot of answers that I've received since I've asked my questions. One is I'm at 9th Street. So it's just a 2-way stop, not a 4-way stop. And as recently as yesterday, I'm coming up for a walk, probably, I don't know, the east side maybe, crossing back over to 9th, and 2 cars went through the stop sign without even slowing down. And I'm on foot, And the same thing happens when I'm coming down 9th Street in my car to try to turn left or right. So this might be a question for Abe, whether there is an opportunity to either do the beacons or a crosswalk. I think it just would be safer all around on 9th Street. And then I'm a big proponent of roundabouts. I'm an East Coast girl. We call them rotaries there. What would be the timeline? Because I think it's going to be a big PR campaign for the citizens and residents of the area. How long would it take to install the roundabouts? Estimate.
Gabe?
I think in turn, I would just say too, I think that we're looking at, you know, based on our history of deployment of roundabouts in the city, you know, it takes some time to plan them out, to engineer them, and to put the resources together, either state or county grants, or federal grants, or general fund dollars that we have to fund these. And so, you know, I'll defer to Abe in terms of how long it's been in the past, but some of our roundabouts have taken a couple of years to deploy.
Yes, that is correct. For the first question, with regards to adding RFBs, it's not usual to add flashing beacons to the stop signs. Some locations we have, like I think 2 or 3 locations in the city that we have LED around the signs, like by the Paul Hickey, we have one. On the Mountain Vista, we have one. But usually utilizing that option, it's because of other reason, not people not respecting the stop sign. In the case of 9th, I really believe that those folks do know the stop sign is there. So it's not about increasing visibility. They just intentionally decide to run it. So it's more a matter of enforcement. Yeah, and with the crosswalk, it's a similar issue. You don't want, I mean, I know the majority of the folks walk across at 9th are very familiar with the area, but I think painting the crosswalk can cause a false sense of security to the pedestrian that, hey, just because the city painted a crosswalk here, that means the cars absolutely are going to stop. While, as you know, we do have some that don't. So I think it's better that we take the enforcement route to, you know, eliminate that situation as much as we can. And another problem with the not problem, but the complication is it's not just a crosswalk. I mean, then you'd need ADA access, you need ramps on that side.
Okay.
You need landing. Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff that comes with the painted crosswalk, and we know that we don't want to build a full-on sidewalk on the road. But then if you build a crosswalk, the least you need is like landing, ADA landing on both sides. So that's concrete work that can add to the cost and complication of design.
Okay.
Although, and the other point would be that further up north, we actually have more kind of sidewalks and ADA ramps and stuff like that, so that they actually fit further up north.
All right. And then I have one more question or comment. I think you talked about doing the traffic studies starting at 4 o'clock, but the traffic usually builds between 3 and 3:30.
The question I think was, what was the 1 hour at which the peak evening traffic was collected? And I was guesstimating off of my memory. David, do you have the actual 1 hour that was selected in the evening?
I believe in the evening it was 4 to 5 o'clock, but just to answer the question is when we do peak hour traffic counts, in the evening it's from 4 to 6 p.m. and in the morning it's 7 to 9 a.m. So we take the 1 hour within that 2 hour realm to come up with the peak hour.
All right. So is there any wiggle room to do a 3 to 4? Because if you're on Rancho Santa Fe at 3:15, I mean, you got to be on Rancho Santa Fe before 3.
Are you talking about the speed study now?
No, I'm talking just about traffic study. Like just the amount of traffic, really, you have to be on Rancho Santa Fe before 3:15, or you're going to be sitting in traffic.
Yeah.
So 4 o'clock is a little late, in my opinion.
Okay. The tubes are sitting there all day, so they can read them and.
Got it. Okay. All right. That's fine. Thank you so much for your help.
So let's move to some of the Q&A boxes. I thought this was a good question. What's the advantage of reducing the traffic lane width? We talked about that several times. Dave or Dan, did you want to take a stab at that? Why is this a positive thing, especially, you know, on the northern portions where the lanes are quite large and the public right of way is quite wide. The southern portion, it gets a bit more narrow, but Dave had pointed out about the potential for moving some of the lanes further east to make room on the west side for cycling access. Did either Dave or Dan want to take this?
Well, it's a traffic calming benefit. So people drive slower when the lanes are narrower, just naturally, psychologically. But I'll leave it to Abe or Dave to add more technical depth to that answer.
So that is true. When you narrow down the lanes, it makes it a little bit more difficult. You know, just to, I guess, put it in perspective, along Coast Highway and Oceanside, you got 4 10-foot travel lanes. And if you ever driven through Oceanside on Coast Highway, it's almost impossible to try and pass someone in the travel lane because they're 10-foot wide. So by narrowing down the travel lanes, you definitely reduce the speeds, I think. So by widening the shoulders, though, I mean, it's not just we're looking at complete streets whenever we're working on a traffic project. So it's not just about the automobile, but it's also the pedestrians and the bicyclists, and obviously the people that are riding horses in the area, I guess. So we try to make improvements and provide safety for all road users. And by narrowing down the travel lanes and hopefully reducing speeds, we're also widening the shoulders to make it more convenient and safer for pedestrians and bicyclists.
All right, so then it looks like we have the next person with their hand up is Jeff Vaccaro. Jeff, I'm gonna allow you to talk and then you can unmute yourself.
Yep, good evening. The presentation was excellent. Longtime city resident, actually all my life. My family moved here before I was even conceived. Anyways, I think Dan answered most of my questions as far as operating as a region and discouraging the cut through traffic. Some kind of follow-up questions to that. Have we contacted some mapping providers such as Waze and Google and Apple to actually take that route out of routing algorithms to possibly reduce traffic? And another question is, have we looked at contacting Carlsbad and reducing signal timing at Rancho Santa Fe, Olivenhain Road by the Water District, and that other Rancho Santa Fe, Avenida La Cima light?
Abe, did you, those sound like Abe questions. Abe, did you want to take that? I know that we're coordinating with Carlsbad regarding the Calle Acervo, La Posta, Rancho Santa Fe Road kind of lights to make sure it's taken into consideration the facts on the ground there. I'm not sure if what influence we have on the social media apps and the kind of mapping apps, or in terms of the lights out there on Rancho Santa Fe and Liebenhain. Abe, do you have any thoughts on those?
Well, it's a good point. The mapping navigation companies, TomTom, Apple, Google, they get into contracts with cities, but that's only big cities. Like in Long Beach, we had a contract with them that they did allow us, by basically us allowing them to utilize the data from our city, the travel time and volume data that they were collecting from the city. They would allow us to add our construction projects, our lane closures, our road closures to the network. But as an individual, as far as I know, I don't have the authority to contact Apple and Google and ask them to take a road off. What we were doing at that point, at certain situations, we would add a what we used to call dummy construction sites to basically take a sensitive road off of the Google map or Apple map at that point. There were a few of us in the traffic team who had access to the Google map, so we could add a construction activity that wasn't really there if there was a parade going on, or if there was a traffic activity, or there was a situation that we needed a level of service better on that road. But as an individual, I don't think we have the authority. I can't just contact Google and say, hey, I'm the city traffic engineer, take this road off of your map, or or virtually increase delay so that it wouldn't fall on people's navigation route.
What about the question about Carlsbad, working cooperatively with Carlsbad to encourage folks that are coming from La Costa or from San Marcos to go straight on to the 5 freeway if they want to go south?
Again, as you, I think, or Dan mentioned, it's not really something that city engineers or officials can direct or mandate people. It's more about what kind of navigation app they use if they're not familiar with the route. So whatever has the lowest travel time, that's usually what people choose. I don't know how.
I think Councilman Mosca is referring to my second question as far as collaborating with them on influencing the light timing, the traffic signal timing on those 2 traffic signals to the north of the corridor to really discourage traffic use by making the red light cycles longer in that corridor direction. So we can
Absolutely, yeah.
discourage the APTs from entering into the corridor.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that. Yeah, that's definitely something we can do. We do utilize it on our own corridors. Usually on corridors, you want to have what's called signal coordination to create that green wave, synchronization between signals to provide the best, highest average, speed of the corridor by matching and coordinating your signals. But mismatching them and basically ruining your coordination causes that traffic calming that you're after, so that nobody can basically hit all of the greens if they want to.
Or even hold off the congestion in that 2-lane corridor where there's really no residents on both cities by the water district and by that open space. You could really stop up traffic there even before it enters the corridor.
Jed, do you want to mention your coordination with council member Carlsbad from that region, just in the spirit of collaboration?
Yeah, we just, Carlsbad just had an election, just like a lot of other cities. And Teresa Costa has been elected in District 4. And I've been working with her early discussions about how we can work together on making a lot of these roads just safer roads and easier for circulation. So these are conversations that we'll be having with on the political level. I know on our staff level, there's coordination, but on the political level, we'll start to have more coordination. Actually, District 4, it's actually District 4 in Carlsbad and in Encinitas. District 4 in Carlsbad hadn't had a city council member for a couple of years, and so this will be an opportunity for her to really engage in that district and try to improve the quality of life, especially around La Costa and Olivenhain Road. I do think that this is a really good point, because sometimes in the morning time, I'll go north on Rancho Santa Fe Road and then turn left onto Olivenhain. And the issue for me going straight up Olivenhain to Leucadia is that it's so backed up. Again, this is why a lot of folks coming from La Costa or from San Marcos are dropping down the north-south feeders, because it's really congested right as soon as you turn left onto Olivenhain. It really is backed up. And so I do think that there are things that we can do working with Carlsbad to coordinate those lights so that we're encouraging people to move west to the 5 freeway. Even when you look at that the left-hand turn going on to El Camino Real, it's so backed up that it actually backs up a lot of the other lanes as well. And so I do think that there's some work to be done there. So Dan, we're kind of coming down to the final moment. Did you want to, are there questions that you think in the Q&A box? I do want to call on Glenn Johnson at some point, who is a.
Okay. Let me cycle through a couple of these that hopefully we can answer quickly, and then hand it back to Glenn. There's a question on horse trailers navigating roundabouts and fire engines and lack of that in Leucadia. And so what we've said is that in the design phase, which hasn't happened yet, those will be design requirements that the horse trailers and fire engines be able to easily navigate this. And we're reassured by the professionals that the aprons and some of those techniques are sort of industry standard and able to accommodate that. So they're confident, but of course it'll come down to design. And there's a bunch of questions, of course, on the Goodson project, or there's now a Keene project that's been submitted last month. The Bloomfield, it's a single family bonus density project. Those are really out of scope for this project. Rest assured that we're spending a lot of time fighting those, but that's a slightly different hat. Do roundabouts need to be lit with streetlights? Dave or Abe, can you answer that?
And if they have to be lit with streetlights, what is something that we can do that would be in keeping with the character of our community?
And I would just agree with that. They do have to be lit for safety reasons, but you would want to do it with the character of the community. So post type lights, I think, would work fine.
What do we currently do, Abe, with, I'm trying to think what we do with the one on Santa Fe and the ones on Leucadia. I don't see on Santa Fe, I don't see really much in terms of lights.
I do believe they do have street lighting. I think it's a design mandate.
All right, so those are things that we need to absolutely look into and highlight. I think that's a really good point, that whatever we do there needs to be, we need to make sure it's consistent with our desire for dark skies. Did you want to, Glenn Johnson's hand is up, and he is a member of our Traffic and Public Safety Commission who may actually hear these recommendations at some point. So let's give him a sec to discuss. And Glenn, you can unmute yourself, and we're right down to the wire in terms of timing, Glenn. But if you wanted to ask a question or give any feedback.
Okay, I clicked unmute. You got the question about streetlights. I think that's the killer with the roundabouts, is it for safety. And I'm thinking of traffic and public safety. We need some level of lighting at a roundabout. It doesn't have to be freeway lighting, but some level is necessary. The roundabouts obviously are a good way to go here. And I'll leave it at that.
My gosh, Glenn, that I think that was the shortest comment I've ever seen.
So let me see if I can't knock off a couple of the written questions before we run out of time. Is there a reason traffic circles aren't thought to be suitable for other current stop sign locations? We've looked at them. The next busiest, I think, is the Olive Crest intersection. They don't reduce the peak hour congestion significantly more beyond the two that we're proposing. And they're relatively expensive. So the barrier and advocacy of getting the city to spend the money goes up the more we try to get them to spend. Question is the offset at 7th Street and Rancho Terrace, dangerous left turn lanes. Any recommendations, solutions to increase safety there? That was brought up. It was brought up primarily in the context of the safe crosswalk design. And so I think that as the traffic engineers look at the crosswalk there, they can add in the left turn conditions.
Yeah, that was something we highlighted. I don't know if we want to make it explicit in our recommendation to take a look at that, but that's something we may want to. there's another question about wildfire consideration. And I think that's certainly going to be a consideration from, from this project perspective. We don't want to slow down any emergency vehicles. And that's something that when we're designing, if we're designing whatever the project's going to be, it would have to not slow things down. And then from an evacuation standpoint, we are looking at that evacuation plan.
And Tom Candelaria asks, why are there no examples of what a roundabout is compared to? It appears a roundabout is the only proposed solution, et cetera, et cetera. There's no need for always in a roundabout study supports the data 2 hours, et cetera. And so the solution we proposed here was a recommended solution based on the work that we've done over the last year and a half. The data that was shared in the study process will be published on the website, and we are committed to full transparency there. We're not trying to hide anything, but in the interest of having a 2-hour meeting efficient and only going over by however much we end up going over, we didn't present all 10 scenarios that we looked at.
There's a lot of questions about the 10-foot lanes. I mean, I think we sufficiently answered that question. Do we have anything else to add? I think it's, the engineers are saying that if you take some of these lanes from perhaps their current status of 13, 14 feet to 10 feet, that it actually calms traffic because it's narrower. And given that feeling to drivers that the road is more narrow, so they're slowing down. And in fact, that's something that we're seeing throughout the city as a goal to reduce a lot of the travel lanes to 10 feet in width.
There's a question here about how much time would be saved if all the 4 ways were removed. I think all but the 2 high volume ones at Lone Jack and El Camino del Norte take about 2 minutes off of the transit time.
And and I think that what you generally say, Dan, in these situations, probably apt to say again, which is that what was the goal here? It wasn't necessarily just wasn't just about travel time to speed up everybody through the corridor. It was to shorten one's commute, but not necessarily take away the community character.
And then the very last question is the speed limit didn't get more discussion. What is needed to reduce it by at least 5 miles per gallon, which I assume is hour? The traffic study process, Abe, can you just give a very quick high level rundown of what because this is all highly regulated stuff, what you're able to do and what data you need to collect in order to do that?
Sure. Yes, as you mentioned, there is a nationwide traffic and engineering and traffic survey guideline that traffic engineers have to use to establish the speed limits on roadways. It basically says the drivers on a roadway are the best people to establish the speed limit based on how they drive their vehicles and the characteristics of the road and geometry of the road. So in short, we, using radar, collect the speed data for 50, 100, 200 vehicles on that roadway in a non-congested. The rules say we have to collect data at a situation that is not congested. So we can't go at 3:30 or 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon and just shoot vehicles at speeds of 5, 7, 8 miles an hour. It has to be in an off-peak, non-congested situation. And then we sort them at a speed at which 85% of the vehicles drive at or below that speed by law would be the speed limit of the road. So if we have 100 vehicles on a roadway, we by radar check their speed again at a regular day, non-weekend, non-peak period. And out of those 100 vehicles, we find out that 85% of them are driving at 33 miles per hour 34 miles per hour or below, the speed limit on the road should be 35. And if you choose any speed limit other than that, the ticket, if it gets challenged, that a speed survey is usually the first document that the attorneys and the people who got those tickets ask from the city. They take them to court, and it's automatic dismissal if the resident got a ticket at a roadway that the speed survey was not valid. The traffic engineers have the option of lowering it by only 5 miles an hour. Again, I'm simplifying the story here, but if the speed limit ends up 35 based on these guidelines, I have the authority to lower it by 5 under certain conditions and make it a 30. After we make these improvements to the road, narrowing down the lanes, adding these extra signages, if we are painting crosswalks, all the pavement marking goes in, the lane narrowing goes in. Then we can go do another round of a speed survey and see what the results we get. Our experience in Encinitas has been, we've done this on Vulcan, we've done this on San Alejo, we've done this on South 101, we've done this on Neptune. Every time we narrow down the lanes from the 13, 14, 15 feet width to 10s, we have been able to lower the speed limit. So I'm very, very optimistic that we should be able to lower the speed limit on Rancho Santa Fe after narrowing down the lanes and restriping the road.
Awesome. So I think with that, we'll conclude the Q&A session for this evening. However, the intention of this meeting is to initiate the conversation and not to end it. And so we're going to have Jenny come up and talk a little bit about the next steps and ways that we could keep this conversation going.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, everybody, I'm Jenny Hawk. Thank you so much for sharing your Thursday evening with us. Since we're already over time, I'm just going to keep this pretty quick so everyone can get back to Netflix or bed. So Dan, if you could move to the next slide, please, that would be awesome. I'm just going to talk about a little bit about the ways that we've been engaging the community in this conversation and some of the ways we've been gathering feedback from different people in the community. And also, if anybody has additional feedback after this meeting or questions that they haven't had a chance to ask, I'm just going to run you through how you might be able to provide that and get those questions answered. Okay, next slide. So one of the things that we did to engage the community in dialogue about Rancho Santa Fe Road and what were people's concerns about the road, what ideas they had for improving it, was to create groups on both Facebook and Nextdoor. A lot of people in this meeting are also in those Facebook and Nextdoor groups. We have 111 members in the Facebook group and 52 members in the Nextdoor group. If you are interested in joining those groups, if you're not on them, they're pretty easy to join. You can just go ahead and search in Facebook or Nextdoor Rancho Santa Fe Road Task Force, and that should pop up our, that should return our group for you. Just click on the join button, and once an admin approves your request, you can get into the group and you can make comments and you can post questions and provide any sort of feedback. If you want to have conversation with neighbors, you know, close by or across the community, you can engage in that type of conversation there. We've seen a lot of people posting questions on the social media pages. We're actually in the process right now of creating an FAQ document, a frequently asked questions document, where we've been pulling questions from the various social media platforms in an attempt to help get those questions answered and provide some information to different community members. We plan to publish that FAQ document on the Alevinheim Town Council website, which we'll talk about in a minute. We have another slide for that. Oh, we're already on that slide. Okay, good. So for the...
I took that as a cue.
Thank you, Dan. I promised to be quick, so that was perfect. The OTC website currently doesn't have a tab for the Rancho Santa Fe Road Traffic Task Force, but we're working on developing the content, and it should be, I hope that it will be live in the next, I don't know, 2 weeks or so, hard to say, but something that we're working on. And on that tab, on the website, you'll be able to find a lot of information about the background of the task force, how it formed, the goals of the task force, the various committees involved. There's a couple committees. We heard from one earlier, the Community Character Committee. There's also a data analysis committee, and then the steering committee, which are the speakers, or primarily the speakers that we've heard from tonight, with the addition of city staff and David as well. So you'll be able to find background information, and then any of the studies that we looked at tonight, that is also going to be posted there. Any additional reports from the city that may arise through this process. The frequently asked questions document I mentioned earlier, that will be on the website as well. And also, if there are any meetings, any upcoming meetings such as this one, you'll be able to find information about the meetings on the website. So like I said, it's not live currently, but please check back in, I don't know, two or 3 weeks and see if you can see that page live on the website. Okay, so next slide, please, Dan. All right, so next steps, where do we go from here, from tonight's meeting? The task force, Rancho Santa Fe Road Traffic Task Force, will continue to collect feedback from the community regarding the recommendations that we've been speaking about tonight. So some of the ways that we're going to do that are in the Facebook and Nextdoor groups that we mentioned earlier. Another way that we plan to collect some feedback is to send out another survey for residents so that they can weigh in on the different solutions that we've been talking about in tonight's meeting, or provide any additional input via the survey. So look for that in the next month or so. I do believe that the people who have signed up to participate in this meeting should be in receipt of any future communication from the group, including a potential survey. So that would include everybody here tonight. And then we also plan to hold another community meeting, similar to the one that we've had tonight, possibly in person at the meeting hall if the COVID restrictions are lifted by that point. If not, we'll probably do another Zoom meeting, because this format seemed to work pretty well in fostering conversation. I think that's going to be held in in January, but the date is still to be determined. And the purpose of that meeting would be to finalize the recommendations that we want to ultimately provide to the city for any potential changes to the road. And then after the recommendations are finalized based upon input from the community and the ability of the task force to create that consensus that we've been talking a lot about tonight, those recommendations will be delivered to the city, and we will continue to advocate for the implementation of those changes. And on that note, Joe probably knows a lot more about what that process looks like. So I'll hand the mic over to our city council person, Joe Mosca, who can probably tell you a little bit more about how that works to move through the city.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Great job. I think that once we get to the point where we have a recommendation from our community, we'll hand it over to the city, and part of it will likely go to the city council. I think that there are some items that we can deliver right directly to the city council vis-a-vis Abe, and that they could perhaps act on those sooner than later. And then other recommendations may have to go through the Traffic and Public Safety Commission. And Glenn Johnson was on the line tonight, and he's a member of the Traffic and Public Safety Commission, and it probably, like the roundabouts, would probably go through that commission for hearings, and that's where we would definitely need folks in the community to help advocate. Anyway, it seems like we've had a awesome kind of second meeting, really great meeting where we've all discussed a lot of information here and gotten some feedback, and we're going to have more opportunities in the future for community members to give their feedback. And so I don't know if, Dan, you have anything else to say?
Yeah, just a plug. The Traffic Commission has representatives from the 5 communities of Encinitas, except with Peter Cole having moved out of Olivenhain earlier this fall. We don't have an Olivenhain representative at the moment. But it just so happens that the city is currently recruiting applicants for that post. So if people are interested in serving the city and representing Olevenheim, it's a great opportunity.
Yeah. Good plug, good plug. And then also there are a number of other commissions too, from Parks and Rec Commission to Senior Commission that have vacancies on them, and they need folks like yourself to step up and serve. These are like the ultimate in volunteering role. You're not paid, well, you're paid in satisfaction of knowing that you're helping your community. So we generally do our big recruitment for commissions right around now, and the city council will start to appoint in January. So if you're interested in Traffic and Public Safety Commission, that's one of the commissions that we actually have based on the traditional communities. And Olevenheim, as Dan said, doesn't have a rep right now. And so if you're interested in that, do apply, or any of the other commissions. You can find more information on that on our city website. So if that's it, this has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to continuing this conversation. And I do want to say happy holidays to everybody. And thank you to all of my fellow steering committee members. I think we did a great job. I think you guys did a great job. So kudos to you, hands off to you guys. Thank you for this meeting tonight. Did anybody want to, any of my fellow steering committee members want to say anything before we drop off here?
I
Amy,
just want
I
to
thought you did a
thank
great job.
everybody. I just want to thank everybody for participating in the meeting tonight. I know it's 2 hours, it's been a long meeting, but it's important for us to create that consensus and get input from everybody. So thank you guys so much for joining.
All right, so with that, good night and happy holidays, and we will see you soon and chat more about Rancho Santa Fe Road. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.